Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another edition of Daily Scone. I forgot to ask this yesterday, but right from the shoot, so I don't forget at the end, do me a solid. Please hit the subscribe button, however you're listening. iTunes, Google Music, Google Play Music, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean. However you found this, please hit the subscribe button. That's a huge help if you do that. That's how we just continue to generate impressions. That's how we get rated and listed on iTunes and all the other platforms. So if you could hit the subscribe button and share it, huge help. So today we and Ryan Terrio launched a new podcast. Another one, right, Scone? Yep, another one. The Riot Podcast. Terrio and I have done radio together for 5 years on Fridays. And every Friday for 5 years, it's developed its own amazing following, in spite of the fact that it's really unlike anything else I do the other 4+ days of the week on my radio show. But we also noticed that there was a need, maybe a void that hadn't been filled. And it was the opportunity to do a podcast and to extend what we do on Friday into a different part of the week. Instead of making people wait until Friday, said, hey, look, let's do a podcast together. And actually about 3-4 years ago, we launched a podcast, the Riot Podcast, and execution was difficult. It was more just getting the time together weekly to do it and arranging it and committing to it and finding the chemistry that we have on Fridays and doing it on the podcast. And so we did 8 episodes and then it fizzled. And I think we're committed, though, this time around to doing it again and doing it stronger. We relaunched it today. We recorded it at Traction. We did it on Facebook Live. And so that way we had a live audience that could interact with us. And then we published the audio at 1045ESPN.com on the radio station's app. So that's available on iTunes and all the other places as well. But anyway, the roundabout way is part of that podcast was doing a Q&A with the people who were watching live. And someone asked how I go about booking guests on the radio show. And so I figured I'd take a minute to talk about that today and give you some particular answers. And I would also encourage you, if you are in media or aspire to be, scroll back a few episodes and find the episodes of of Daily Scone, where I interviewed Jordy Collada. We did a 2-part episode. One was how to prepare for a morning radio show, and the other was about booking guests. And I've said many times, I think that's Jordy's greatest strength is he is a hustler like nobody I've seen when it comes to that end. He gets huge guests because he is fearless and unafraid and goes and gets it. Anyway, so he shared a lot of those secrets, but I thought I would just share some practicality of how I book for my radio show. So I'll even just take the first 2 days of this week as a for instance of how I look for guests, how many in a show, and how I go about booking them. So radio show is 3 hours a day, and I don't have a hard and fast rule about how many guests I want on the air on a given show. It feels like if you throw out an arbitrary number like 1 per hour, that's pretty good. There are instances where it exceeds that, though. So like on Thursdays, I have a weekly feature with Mike Detillier to talk football, and he's on the whole 4 o'clock hour, so it's 4 segments right there. So on another day, if I were to do 1 guest per hour, that would be a total of 3. Well, on Thursdays, that's already 4 segments that have a guest. And then during football season, I also have my Fantasy Blitz on Thursday, and then opposing media. So that's 6. That's half the show already is made up of having a guest. And then Jacob Hester comes in the last segment. So that's actually 7 of my 12 segments right there that I know on Thursdays during football season, guests. So my point is it varies. And on Monday during football season, I probably won't have any. I'm just recapping the weekend, take a lot of interaction as people react to the football weekend. So that's specifically in season. In football, I think seasonally it does vary. And I like to have seasonal features. So like during college baseball season, every Monday for years, we've had Patrick Coogan come on with us to start the 5 o'clock hour on Monday to recap the baseball weekend. I'll look at, during baseball season, different features like any time LSU plays a home baseball game, we'll do a segment called At the Box, where we'll talk to Chris Blair, the voice of the Tigers, and he'll kind of give us a scene setter for that day's game. So you can kind of build and construct your show that way with recurring feature segments and guests. During college football season also, and that's when you tend to be more heavy. I can tell you, aside from Mike D and the ones I mentioned, Rohan Davies a feature, Russ Mitchell of College Football News is every Wednesday. We're adding a couple of new ones as well this year. We're on Tuesdays. Larry Holder of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, will join us to do a Saints segment. I'm excited about this. Smacker Miles is going to join us as well to do a segment called Smack Talk, where she'll riff on topics not just LSU but the SEC. So that'll be a football season feature that I'm really excited about. I really, really like having female voices on sports talk. I think it is so underserved because roughly a quarter of my audience is female. I think it's empowering to have a female voice, and I also think that this is just like psychologically, I believe this. I think female, like in a male-dominated industry, I think females bring a degree of not sanity, of composure, maybe of civility to a conversation that so often can become tenuous, where, like, if you just think of it this way, if you put 20 guys in a room and they're all drinking and like the whole dynamic of that room is like fart jokes and guys being Neanderthals, like we tend to like regress. A woman comes into the conversation and everybody's IQ has to elevate. It's like you're just on your better behavior. So like I think if you can find a strong female voice, like absolutely do it. And Smacker is one, and so I'm excited to have her participate in the show and contribute to the show of this fall as well. But anyway, so back to the point about booking guests. So like you kind of build this template and this structure seasonally of how you want recurring guests. But on a given day, like we're in the summer right now, and so I don't really have recurring guests other than like annual features, and those are few and far between. Like I have Mike Detillier, and then on Tuesdays Lee Feinswald comes on, and that's just, Lee's done it since we started the show, and it's just a sort of off-kilter type thing that Lee and I do. It's not hard-hitting sports. It's more just a fun thing where the old journalist and me, the young. It's like the old versus young. It's the new versus the old, and we butt heads, and it's fun, and we like each other, and we talk about beer too. And so it's more of a hey, loosen your collar and just have fun for 10 minutes type deal. But anyway, this week in particular, so like Monday, I came into Monday's show thinking, all right, well, it's been 4 days of Saints training camp, and I haven't had a guest on yet to talk about it. This would probably be a good time. So I wanted to get someone on the Saints beat who's been to all the practices. So then you start to think, okay, well, what guys on the Saints beat might be available? Well, I know I'm going to have Larry Holder weekly on my show during the season, so I didn't necessarily want to go there. And so I thought, I haven't had Luke Johnson on the show in a while. And Luke worked at The Advocate. He was on the LSU beat. After the baseball season, took a job working for NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, as a Saints beat writer. So I was like, let me reach out to Luke. Well, I've known Luke for a long time, so it was very easy just to send Luke a text and say, hey, can you come on to talk about Saints camp from over the weekend? No problem. We book a time, locked it in. I think he came on at 4 o'clock. The other thing that I'm trying to think of what else I had on Monday. It's slipping my mind right now. I had one other guest, and it's slipping my mind. I can't believe it. Yeah, it was a huge recruiting weekend. So this LSU commit, Cardell Thomas, took a visit to Florida State, loved it. It created this big tizzy. An in-state kid committed to Georgia, so it was a big recruiting weekend. So I'm like, okay, well, if I know I want recruiting talk, well, Shea Dixon is always really generous with his time, and he's kind of considered like the recruiting guy in LSU circle. So I knew I wanted to get Shea on as well. I know Shea, typically the way his days are structured, it's better for him to come on earlier in the show. So Shea came on at 3:15. Luke Johnson came on at 4 or 4:15. I don't remember exactly. And those are my only two guests for Monday. And I booked both of them day of. Most of the guests I book are day of. Today was kind of a weird day, though, for the show. The Saints were off. LSU hasn't started practice yet. there wasn't any like really big breaking news story until about 20 minutes or no, maybe an hour before I went on air. So, and I had Lee Feinswag was back. He'd been on vacation for like 3 weeks, so I knew Lee was coming on today at 4:15 in his normal slot. But other than that, it was kind of light as far as like breaking news or recurring guests or angles that I felt like I could explore. Well, this goes to show you just how things come together sometimes. Like I tend to, like, I'm recording this right now at 10:42 p.m. Central Time. I tend to, like, after my son is down, I tend to like stay up another couple of hours and do work. That's whenever I record this podcast. That's whenever I start looking ahead for tomorrow's show. That's when I write for Gridiron Now. All the extras that I do, I tend to do like after Drew's asleep. Because when I get home from work and I'm here, like that's me and Drew time and Erica. It's our family time. So when I get home from like 6:30ish until we put him down at 10 or put him in the bath, it's a late schedule for him. It's different, but anyway, that's family time. So I'm just scrolling on Twitter. It's about midnight, and I see James Coe of the NFL Network tweets, "Nothing going on this week. I'm bored AF. Anybody that wants to do a podcast or radio, needs a podcast or radio guest, hit me up." I just happened to see it. Actually, I didn't even see it. A listener of the show responded to him and said, "You should go on at Matt Moscona's show." Well, I'm thinking, all right, well, I knew I didn't have anything lined up for today. So I reply, I'm like, "James, let's do it, man. DM me if you're interested." So I follow him. He follows me back. We communicate on DM last night at midnight Central Time to book it. And lo and behold, that was 3:15 today. And then I knew I had Lee at 4:15. And then I mentioned the news that kind of broke today was that we found out the date of Christian Fulton's hearing with the NCAA. And for those that don't know, like extremely small Cliff's Notes, Christian Fulton, LSU defensive back, 2-year suspension by the NCAA. He's appealing it. Anyway, I thought I'd love to get his attorney on. I've emailed a few times and never heard back. Well, through a friend, I ended up getting his contact number, like his cell phone. So I texted him, and I just said, I explained who I was. I said, "I'd love to have you on the show to talk about Christian Fulton." He replied immediately, "Happy to come on. When are you thinking?" I said, "How about today at 5 o'clock?" "Sure, I can do that. Just provide the station information." I did. He vetted us, I guess, determined we were good, thumbs up. So he came on the show, and that was booked an hour before I went on air by me. So, I think if there's one thing that I'm most envious of with bigger market stations or stations that have just more resources like that, it's people that have producers that book guests for them. If I came in every day to work and I had someone whose job was think a week ahead, what's going to be happening in the news cycle over the next week, who would be a relevant guest, and let me start vetting those possibilities and locking them in, man, like that would be such a burden off my shoulders. We just don't have that person on staff. Like, we just don't have that resource. So, and the other shows like Charles and Jimmy and Jordy and T-Bob in the morning, they're tandem shows, they're 2-person shows, and they have producers. So it's like they could all spend certain resources booking guests. And those are both 2-hour shows, whereas mine's a 3-hour show. So I'm one guy doing a 3-hour show, which is like, believe me, I'm not complaining at all. I'm just explaining the dynamics change depending on day part, depending on how many people are on the show, depending on what staff you have available as well. So it's time consuming. It is. But it's also something that whenever you learn to keep your eyes open and options open, like with the James Coe interview, some of those opportunities present themselves. When the news broke about Christian Fulton, I started thinking, okay, well, who would be relevant to get on and how can I make that connection? And so made that happen. Just functionally, I would tell you also, something that helps a bunch is go on their social media. If there's someone you'd like to interview, either DM them on Twitter or private message them on Facebook or Instagram and see if they'll respond. The other thing you can do is a lot of times with athletes or whatever it may be, they may have a website with a contact for media inquiries. And a lot of times, well, I shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes you get an answer immediately, and sometimes those go to emails that are checked like once every 6 months. So, and I don't think that there's any harm in trying to message people through multiple different outlets. Like if you tweet someone and Facebook private message them and go to their website and email the contact, like that may seem excessive, but you just don't know which medium they check more often. Like me personally, my email's always open. I'm on Twitter all day. I very rarely check Facebook private messages. If you Facebook or Instagram me on a private message, chances are I'm not going to see it immediately. So, like, that's not the best way to get me. If you email me or tweet me, I'm going to see it. So, I guess that's just my own personal philosophy is, you know, just reach out in as many avenues as possible. And if you have enough foresight or the opportunity with foresight, like to look ahead as to what may come and try to book people in advance, get ahead of their schedule, that's obviously convenient as well. It's a luxury I don't always have, and admittedly something that I struggle with at times. But so that's just a peek into how I go about booking guests for my show. I hope that helps. I think there's probably a lot of different ways to do it, but that's just how I do it, and it's worked. It's worked for me and worked for my show. So I hope that's helpful. Again, if you're still with us, I appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. That's a huge, huge help. If you could subscribe and share this, pass it along. That's how we'll continue to grow it. And as always, if you got questions, if you got comments, hit me up, email me, mattmoscona@gmail.com, MattMoscona, mattmoscona@gmail.com. Tweet me, reply to this on Twitter, Facebook, message me, whatever. If you have topics you'd like me to discuss, I'd love to do so. In the meantime, until next time, this has been Daily Scone.